This champion is something special to me. Going to Vancouver, placing top 4 in the tournament, and getting this champion as my reward is just something that I will forever treasure. And to celebrate this champion and her release tomorrow, I thought I would just ascend her and just showcase this champion because she is such a phenomenal character. And honestly, the second I got her, I just fell in love because this champion is more than a champion to me. This is a champion that I had to do a lot of stuff to get. It wasn't an easy task, right? You know, going to Vancouver, going to the Battle Room Brawl, placing top 4. This champion made sure I had to put in work to get her. But hey, I got her and now she's ascended. And I'm honestly glad that I won her because her story, her background, and her being a Kabam original champion just really makes me love this character. So now let's talk about Chee'ilth and everything that she does. So her passives. At first, she has Gamma's Bane, or what it's called in game, oppose the one below all. And what this does is she gets 40% debuff potency versus Gamma champions. Now Gamma champions are kind of rare in this game, but the Gamma champions that she takes very well are notoriously annoying defenders like Sasquatch and Immortal Abomination. Additionally, she has a base plus 30% duration to her debuffs, which is very strong for her bleed mechanics, and additionally, she has Spirit Charges. Now, Spirit Charges are gained throughout the fight, and they grant bleed potency and crit damage, and also cleanse passives. So they are the bread and butter of this champion. They really make her who she is with the cleanse and the pretty massive bleed damage. And last but not least, when you punish a heavier special attack with your own heavy attack, you pause all your personal debuffs for 5 seconds. And this is very important because this lets her stack up her bleeds a lot. And when her bleeds are stacked up completely, she has some very, very good damage output, especially in the longer fights like Labyrinth of Legends, which will be showcased in this video. But now let's talk about Brother Grizzly and Sister Eagle. These are the 2 spirits that Chee'ilth got powers from, and these 2 spirits guide her throughout the fight, and they guide her abilities as well. So Brother Grizzly, he inflicts bleeds on her axe attacks, and these bleeds paired with the heavy pause can stack up quite a bit, and additionally you get plus 2 bleeds on the heavy attack, so this champion really does like her heavy attacks. Additionally, if you interrupt the opponent's heavy or special attack with an attack of your own, you shorten the Spirit Charge timer. Now, Sister Eagle is the healing and protection spirit, and this spirit gives you a very strong block mechanic where you cap out the opponent's attack rating on your block. So whenever you block a hit or parry a hit, the damage you take gets capped, and it gets capped even further if it was a parry. And additionally, whenever you parry, you shorten the Spirit Charge timer as well. So these are the mechanics that Brother Grizzly and Sister Eagle gave to Chee'ilth, and they are pretty powerful mechanics, right? Brother Grizzly pretty much the main DPS as he provides all the bleed damage, and Sister Eagle is the main source of keeping Chee'ilth healthy, right? So yeah, these 2 spirits are just very, very powerful, and of course Chee'ilth herself, who got the powers from them, is also a pretty powerful champion. So now let's talk about the special attacks of Chee'ilth. So SP1 is Grizzly's Grit, and this special attack does summon Brother Grizzly, which is a very, very beautiful animation. And Grizzly's Grit is a very unique passive that lets you bypass Unstoppable and also gives you a chance to bleed on every attack. So this is Brother Grizzly's main special attack if you want the damage output, because he gives her the ability to just bleed on any hit, which is very, very good, especially paired with the heavy attack debuff pause. Now also, SP2 is where Sister Eagle comes into play, and she inflicts a Tranquilize. And this Tranquilize is pretty powerful because paired with her cleanse, you pretty much never get any debuffs on you. So that is a very strong special attack as well. But then the SP3 is where they both combine and provide some pretty good bonuses to Chee'ilth. Now, Chee'ilth on the SP3 gains a regen buff, which can be very good for keeping up some of your health. And you also get a 35% vicious passive for the rest of the fight. It is a permanent effect, which is very, very strong because in those longer fights, that extra damage really does come into play. But now let's talk about her awakened ability. And as good as she is on attack, I feel like this was made to make her defensive prowess a lot better. So whenever a champion is immune to Chee'ilth's bleed, she gains precision passives. And while these passives are active, she can crit through blocks. So yeah, if you block one of her hits, it'll be some pretty nasty damage, given that she also gets bonus crit damage rating from her spirit charges. And additionally, she can regen up to almost all the physical damage taken from any physical damage effects. So like Rupture is the big one here that honestly, yeah, that's pretty dang powerful, man. Like countering Rupture just by healing it back up is very, very strong. And any other physical damage effects, but I think it's just that right now, but maybe there's more in the future, so we'll have to see about that. But now it's time to see some gameplay of this champion. So now let's get started here with a quick damage test, and Chee'ilth is mainly a bleed DPS, though she does get some other bonus damage like crit damage rating and also crit rating if she is against a bleed immune champion, but for the most part she is a bleed damage dealer, and she gains these bleeds on her heavy attacks and her axe attacks. Now for the rotation, I like dropping the SP3 first because that vicious passive is honestly very, very nice, and it really does up the damage quite a bit, so I prefer using it instantly. But also there is the SP1, which lets you get a Grizzly's Grip passive, which lets you do bleed on every single hit. And when you pair that with the axe attacks actually do 2 bleeds per hit, and the heavy attack does 4 bleeds per hit. But keep in mind, the Grizzly's Grit isn't a guaranteed bleed, it is just a 50% chance to bleed on any other attack. So here I dropped the SP3 because the vicious passive I feel like is the best way to go for these longer fights. And now we have about 30 bleeds stacked up, and this is where she just really shines, right? Because at this point, the opponent is just melting away really, really fast, and they don't stand a chance. So here I dropped the heavy attack one final time, and the fight is now over. So that is Chee'ilth's like main way of doing damage, which is just spamming heavy attack or just using any of your axe attacks. But now let's showcase the Grizzly's Grip passive. And this passive is just very good for bypassing Unstoppable, for example Juggernaut right here, Rhino who is Gamma as well, or even Hulk who has this as well. There are like a ton of champions that have Unstoppable these days, and it is very good to have a counter like this because this isn't a slow debuff, it's not like a buff or anything, it is just a passive counter to Unstoppable, and that is just super useful because some champions counter debuffs or they counter buffs, but this is just a passive ability. So yeah, it's a very good thing to have for sure, and Chee'ilth here is just doing a good job at maintaining the bleeds as well, but also stopping the Unstoppable. So here I dropped the SP1, and that gives us the Grizzly's Grip passive, so we are just now in total control of the fight. And the Grizzly's Grip passive has a pretty strong duration, so once you get it going, you pretty much have it for the rest of the fight because it just has a very, very strong duration. It's 1 SP1 as well to get it, so 1 bar of power, a 16-second duration, and you have a very strong mechanic that is just very useful. So here it drops more heavy attacks, we just ignore the Unstoppable, then we drop the SP1 one more time, and this wraps up the fight. And that was a pretty good showing of the Grizzly's Grip passive. But now I want to showcase her Despair heal block because this champion plus Despair is a very good pairing given that she inflicts bleeds pretty much all the time. So you want at least 7 debuffs to block out healing with Despair, and she has more than enough debuffs to do that. Her bleeds stack up very, very well, so once she gets going, you have a pretty much infinite heal block. So this mechanic, which isn't even part of her base kit, is still very, very good, and it just lets her utilize some very strong masteries. And speaking of masteries, Deep Wounds as well is great for this champion because her bleeds have pretty good duration, but adding 2 seconds is kind of huge given that you can pause the debuffs for 5 seconds. So here I drop the SP3 and we get the Vicious passive as well as the healing for some extra top up. And this is going pretty dang well because look at the bleed count, man, like 33 at this point. And he is just melting and he can't even regen either. So there is nothing helping him and he is now down. Our first Gamma threat here, we have Red Hulk. Now Red Hulk is a Gamma character and Gamma champions are very much Chee'ilth's best fight because she gets plus 40% debuff potency versus these champions. So they stack up very well and they also do a ton of damage too. So once you get going with Chee'ilth in these fights, the damage output becomes honestly absurd. It is some lethal bleed damage, and paired with like the pausing as well, you get some very insane stacks of bleeds that just take for so much damage because of the Gamma ability. So I feel like she was made to be a Gamma hunter, especially versus like I-Bomb or Sasquatch or also OG Hulk because of the cleanse passives to help bypass his physical vulnerabilities, to help bypass I-Bomb's poisons. There are just a lot of ways that she utilizes her mechanics to help stop Gamma characters, which really makes sense lore-wise because she opposes the Gamma mutates and she opposes the one below all. But now we have our bleeds going a ton. We have about 38 stacked up and we're just getting started here, man. Now we have 42 stacked up and yeah, the damage output at this point is very strong. He is now melting. The bleeds just keep on stacking up. Here we drop another heavy attack. Now we're at 48. Here we just get the intercept yet again. And now he's at 51 stacks of bleed. And now this matchup is over. And that's just how strong she is versus Gamma champions. So now let's show her questing prowess as we make our way to the ultimate Gamma threat. So this is 8.3. This is a lane where you want to have a striker ready, as with most 8.3 lanes, but if you're a skilled champion, you get some bonus crit damage rating, and that's pretty much about it for this lane. But also, there is an Ant-Man here, and Ant-Man has a glancing mechanic, but the glancing is on a debuff, and Chee'ilth is great for countering debuffs with her cleanse mechanic. So this debuff is great for countering annoying science champions, like right here Ant-Man, also I-Bomb, Quicksilver, the Overseer, just so many science champions that have debuffs to make them annoying on defense. So Chee'ilth is just a great science counter, but she is especially great versus those science Gamma champions. But this fight's going very well. He wants to glance us, but he can't because we just keep on purifying the debuff, so he doesn't stand a chance whatsoever. We go back in, we get the intercept yet again, we drop the relic here, and this was a very good showing of that very strong cleanse mechanic. Enter another Gamma character, this time it's She-Hulk, and no big deal, She-Hulk is one of the easier Gamma characters for sure, pretty much no defensive prowess, so Chee'ilth will not struggle in the slightest against this champion, but there are some very annoying Gamma defenders that she is just very good for, and you'll see this later on in this video. So same nodes as the Ant-Man, but there is no glancing this time, which is, you know, pretty fun, but we didn't even glance in the other fight because of her very strong cleanse. So this is pretty much the same thing, just no big deal. And we get the easy heavy attack intercepts as well. Now, some champions have a pretty challenging heavies to intercept because either they have like no distance or they push you back a ton. So it can be kind of annoying sometimes depending on the matchup, but for the most part, her very strong heavy reach lets her counter a lot of different heavy attacks. But there is another Gamma threat completely dealt with. And now we have the Spider-Man 2099, same nodes as the previous two fights. And yeah, she is just good for this lane. As a skill champion, she has very common skill tropes like the bleeds and just having access to cleanse as well. but also some more unique stuff like the Grizzly's Grit passive, which I feel like is one of her strongest mechanics, given that she is the only champion that has a passive stopping of Unstoppable. And I know that Valkyrie has it too, but you need a buff to do that. If her buff gets nullified, she can't counter Unstoppable, but Chee'ilth has just a passive mechanic to do it. But let's continue with this fight here. We just get the intercepts going. Spider-Man 2099 has some very straightforward special attacks to counter and some very straightforward heavy attack animations as well. So this is just one of her perfect fights where she doesn't struggle in the slightest. Starting off a new lane with a Gamma threat, and now this time it is Gladiator Hulk. Now Gladiator Hulk has Unstoppable with the smash mechanic, but Chee'ilth has Grizzly's Grit, so there is a very straightforward way of countering that mechanic, but additionally, we get a slow passive on the opponent thanks to the node in this quest, which lets us inflict a slow passive whenever we drop a bleed onto the opponent. So Chee'ilth's consistent bleeds mean that we get slow pretty much for the entire fight. So pair that with the Grizzly's Grit passive and she is just such a strong counter for this lane. But here we go back in, just get some more bleeds going, and this matchup is now over. So this Gamma threat was pretty easy to deal with. There are a lot of Gamma threats here apparently. I feel like we accidentally hit a very strong hotspot for these Gamma characters, but you know what, Chee'ilth actually likes that because her damage output just gets better with them. So yeah, now we have this OG Hulk, and OG Hulk has his Gamma Rage, where whenever he hits 15 Fury passives, he gets Unstoppable, and the Unstoppable is very, very annoying for sure, but with Chee'ilth's Grizzly's Grit and this quest node slow passive, we pretty much counter him entirely, so there is no stress whatsoever. But now with no Unstoppable, we can just treat this like a normal fight, do our axe attacks, do our regular heavy attacks, and yeah, this matchup is now a wrap after this SP1. So yeah, another Gamma threat just dealt with without any struggle whatsoever. They just keep on coming, don't they? There are a lot more Gamma characters than I thought in this game, and now we have Immortal Hulk, who is honestly one of the scarier Gamma characters given his pretty massive health pool, but thankfully Chee'ilth just destroys this guy given that his heavy range and his special attack range is essentially perfect for heavy countering. And like I said, the heavy attack of the opponent and the special attack of the opponent can really help change a Chee'ilth matchup because it can make things a lot easier or a lot more difficult depending on the heavy range and the special attack range. But Hulk here is definitely helping us with that beautiful heavy attack range and that beautiful special attack range, and it makes this fight a lot faster. So yeah, we have up to 29 bleeds now up to 30, then we drop the SP1, and this matchup is now over. So once we get going, the damage output is just so nasty. But now we have some non-Gamma fights finally. I feel like we were just in a Gamma hotspot there, but now we have this sentry on a new lane, and this lane is Crimson Rage and Bleed Vulnerability. So Crimson Rage is whenever the opponent has a bleed on them, they cannot gain Unstoppable, and if they don't have a bleed on them, then every 8 seconds, they get a 4-second Unstoppable effect. And this is a very long one, right? Like that is a pretty massive duration for an Unstoppable, and having Chee'ilth and her bleeds is just a very handy thing because it just lets her counter this ability very easily. But even if she had no bleeds, she still has the Grizzly's Grit passive, and that lets her counter Unstoppable passively. So yeah, very good for this lane in 2 different ways as well. But now we have this Yellow Jacket here, same thing, same nodes, just no big deal given that we have the Unstoppable counter and also the bleeds to take advantage of. So yeah, Chee'ilth for skill lanes just really works well because she just has a lot of very common skill tropes, and that's never a bad thing. That's honestly a good thing, right? Because in quest design, they want multiple counters to a path. So having a common skill trope is good because that means that you'll probably most likely be good for a certain path in a quest. So having a common skill trope but also having some unique stuff is probably the best utility kit possible to have, and Chee'ilth has just that. So yeah, utility wise, this champion is very much set. But now we have the Sorcerer Supreme fight, and Sorcerer Supreme is one of those fights where the heavy range is terrible and the special attack range just pushes you super far. So this is one of her challenging fights in my opinion, and to deal with it, you want to just not care about anything and just go in and just do your regular hits. And to build up your spirit charges, just go for the parries instead of the heavy intercepts, because you can't really heavy intercept her, so you won't get too many spirit charges if you're not parrying her. So yeah, that's how you want to deal with this fight. And you can intercept the SP2 if you wanted to, but I'm just playing it slow. And even playing it slow, she still does very good here. So yeah, Chee'ilth just very hard to stop, to be honest. But now we have this new path, we have this haunted path. And this is fine for her because whenever a debuff expires on the opponent, you get Fury passive. So if they purify it, we get Fury passive. So there is no downside to this lane at all. She is just essentially perfect for it. And yeah, Sentry here, no big deal. His SP1 is hard to counter though, unfortunately, but it is what it is. The SP2 isn't, so if there is an opponent that has a very hard SP1, but an easy SP2 to counter, try to just push him to the SP2. It'll make things a lot easier, and doing this lets you get the extra heavy attack to pause your debuffs for 5 seconds, which really does go a long way for Chee'ilth. But yeah, this matchup is also just very straightforward anyway. Like, this damage output is just nasty, man. And that was a very quick fight there. But now we have this Invisible Woman, and it's the same thing here, just pretty much nothing to worry about. But her heavy attack is very hard to counter, and her SP1, same thing. So yeah, another scenario where I just use the axe attacks, drop the SP1 for the extra bleeds, and just do my damage that way. Don't care about pausing, don't care about the heavy attacks, just play it the way that helps maximize the damage output, which is, in this case, the SP1. But I can just also drop the SP3 if I wanted to for the extra vicious passive, but I feel like the SP1 is the best way to go here. And yeah, that bleed is doing work now for sure. And those 29,000 mediums too definitely play a part in this damage output, right? But the SP2 thankfully is very easy to counter, so I can just do that. And yeah, the fight is now over. And that's what I was talking about with like finding the best special attack to heavy counter, because not every champion has 2 annoying special attacks, right? Sometimes it's the SP2, sometimes it's the SP1, but it very rarely is both special attacks. So that's why Chee'ilth, while she does have her bad matchups with like very annoying special attacks, there usually is a way to bypass it. But now we have this Titania fight, and this Titania fight is pretty much no big deal. If she goes unstoppable, we have the Grizzly's Grit passive, which just bypasses it, and her debuffs we can just cleanse. So yeah, no struggle here whatsoever, and the SP1 is very easy to counter. So yeah, we're just looking pretty good here, and the heavy attack as well, just very easy to counter. And what I've noticed is most Science champions have very easy heavy attacks and special attacks to counter. So that's why Chee'ilth is just really good for them, because yeah, the Science class, I don't know if it's a coincidence or like if it was on purpose, but yeah, those heavy attacks are like perfect for Chee'ilth, and those special attacks as well, also perfect for her. But now we have this new lane, and this lane is Bloody Mess and Redoubled Determination. So whenever the opponent has a bleed on them, we do increased bleed damage, and when they don't have a bleed on them, then they take 90% less damage. But thankfully, Chee'ilth has pretty much permanent bleed access, which is a very good thing in this case. But just look at this final sequence, man. We drop a heavy attack, now up to 19 bleeds. We drop another one, and we do an extra burst of damage thanks to deep wounds. And this matchup was just so straightforward. But now we have this Karnak fight, and same thing, just a perfect heavy attack to counter, and an even better SP1 as well. So yeah, this matchup is pretty much the perfect Chee'ilth matchup, because check out this heavy attack. Look at this. Watch the SP1, see what he does. He dashes forward at you, so that means we just have the perfect heavy attack opening. And like I said, even if the range is kind of far, Chee'ilth's heavy attack is one of the best when it comes to range, because she lunges forward at the opponent with a pretty massive kick, and that kick has so much range to it. So yeah, a very necessary animation in my opinion. But this matchup isn't over as well, but now we have a pretty scary matchup ahead of us. quite possibly the scariest Gamma defender in the game, besides Maestro, but yeah, that champion, that's for another story. But Sasquatch here has the highest health pool in the game, a ton of regen, a ton of damage res, and also having access to Unstoppable, but we counter that one thankfully due to Chee'ilth's Grizzly's Grit. But now we can just go in, just start getting our bleed damage going, and thankfully Sasquatch has a very friendly heavy attack to counter. The SP1 is not, but the SP2 actually is, so we have that advantage as well. So things are just looking pretty good for us, and here I just decide to not hit him at all and just let him melt away, which he does, and that is a very scary Gamma threat dealt with. We are almost there to the final Gamma threat, but first off, some of these bosses, and these bosses are both Gamma champions, so this is Chee'ilth's ideal matchup, but this is a rough start. I get hit there, and thankfully though we have the SP3, and the SP3 is great for just healing back up any damage that you've taken throughout the fight, and that SP3 is why Chee'ilth is just a very safe attacker overall. And this She-Hulk boss has Newton's Law, which means whenever we knock her down, she gets unstoppable, but whenever we intercept her, we get a slow passive on her as well. But also, we have Grizzly's Grit as well if we need it. So, like, pretty much everything about this fight is just countered by Chee'ilth. The Gamma part, the Unstoppable, just everything works out perfectly for her. But here I get the healing going, and the healing does do quite a bit of work. Like, 323 per tick is some very, very nice regen, especially for these questing purposes. So here I drop a heavy attack, she is now unstoppable, we go back in, get the intercept, and now we are kind of just in control of the fight. Here I drop one more heavy attack, and this is essentially a wrap now. Here I dropped the SP1, didn't get the hit there, but doesn't matter because she just melted away anyway, and that is the She-Hulk boss dealt with. Now we have this Joe Fixit boss, and this Joe Fixit has Ebb and Flow knockdown and bleed vulnerability. No easy feat whatsoever, but Chee'ilth also has a good counter to it given that she has access to bleed. And additionally, this Joe Fixit has cramping. So what cramping does is, whenever Joe Fixit inflicts a weakness on the opponent, you lose your power, and whenever you hit him, you have to like deal with some damage back. So it is very, very annoying, but Chee'ilth here can just cleanse the weakness debuff, which means there is no power drain or no damage back, and that's why she's just so good for this fight, because there is the cleanse, there is the bleeds as well, which are the two things needed for this boss fight. So yeah, Chee'ilth, a great counter to this Joe Fixit, who honestly was a big problem for me when I first explored this quest, but now we can just go back in, drop the heavy attack, he purifies the bleeds, no big deal. Here we drop the SP2 for the Tranquilize, and this Tranquilize is going to be good for helping mitigate some of the debuffs that he inflicts, but also it gets purified right away, so there is that as well. And the Purify makes this fight a lot slower than usual, but Chee'ilth, she still gets it done because she just counters everything about it, and while the damage output might not be there, the utility is still there to counter the boss fight. So yeah, Chee'ilth, honestly just a utility monster, but when she does have her damage output to take advantage of too, that's when she becomes a very, very strong champion. But here I drop the SP1 for the Grizzly's Grit passive. There I purify the weakness, so that means no damage back and no power drain either, so that is perfect. And now this matchup is just going essentially the best way it can go. So here I drop the SP1 again, and that animation is just so beautiful. Like the bear just looks so dang cool. And we can just go back in now, drop another SP1, and this ends the fight, and Joe Fixit is now down. And that was the final fight before the ultimate Gamma threat. This is it. This is the ultimate Gamma threat. You could say it's I-Bomb, you could say it's the one below all, but I feel like the real Gamma threat in this game is Act 8, Chapter 2 Bahamut. Now, this guy is a menace and a half. He is an evil version of Hulk, like a very, very evil version that is just fully corrupted. So How do you deal with this guy? Well, Chee'ilth essentially has everything needed to take him down. She has access to passive damage over time. She has access to cleanse as well. And cleanse is the big one here because whenever he drops an SP1, he inflicts the Saurian on us. And the Saurian is a debuff, so whenever we purify it, he gains a volatility charge, and those charges make the fight a lot faster. So check out this damage output as well, man. Like, the bleeds are ticking a ton. Here we drop the SP3 in a bit, and that gives us even more bleed damage as well for the rest of the fight too. So this is just perfect for Chee'ilth because she gets the maximum advantage of that very, very good vicious passive. So we can just now go into phase 2, and now Bahamut is really, really on the ropes here because, yeah, that damage output from Chee'ilth is so strong. But here he drops the SP1. No big deal here because we have the cleanse charges and we also have the knockdown charges as well now. So we are just in a good spot here. I dropped the SP1 to get the charges and now we are just chilling. So here he drops a heavy attack. I go back in. I get the volatility charge on him. And now the next time he drops an SP1, he will lose his armor. So he drops it here, and that is perfect because we are ready to just counter it. But I actually am not ready because I just forgot what to do here. So I just dexed it. And, you know, that does make this fight a bit longer, but we're still in control of it. So there is no worry whatsoever. Just a minor setback for sure. But hey, we still have a lot of work to do, but Chee'ilth is going to be fine here because of her very good bleed damage that just shreds through Bahamut, right? So we got to be careful here. He drops the SP1, which is perfect. And now the next time he drops the SP1, it'll be time to retaliate with the heavy attack. So let's just play it slow now, get ready for that next radiation blast, and then let's just go in and hopefully he plays ball and throws SP1 here, but he is not doing it so far, so I'm a bit scared at this point. He is just not playing ball at all, but there he gets the volatility charge, then he drops the SP1, and now it's time for the next radiation blast. And here I'm ready for it, so I drop the heavy attack, and we are looking pretty good here because check out this damage, man. Look at that bleed damage. It is just so absurd. 79,000 heavy attack as well. And this is a perfect spot for us because he is just melting at this point. The bleeds are ticking for a ton. Here, drop another heavy attack and another nice crit there. Another massive crit there as well. We are just in a perfect spot right now. So the next time he drops an SP1, he will do another radiation blast, which is perfect because we have our counter attack ready. So let's just bait it out. Here he drops it, thankfully. And now it's time for the next radiation blast to take advantage of. So here I dropped the heavy attack, and yeah, there we go. There I dropped the striker, but now it's time to do some nasty bleed damage. And look at that damage go, man. Oh my gosh. 34,000 right there. 4,000 bleeds per tick. He is just melting because we just melted that previous phase. But now I mess up a bit. No big deal. We're still looking pretty good for this fight. Here he drops the SP1, which is amazing. And now we just need to get some more volatility charges going. And once we have that, we can just get the counter attacks going. And then that'll be it for the final phase. Or no, the second to last phase. The final phase is a pretty fun one. And once you see it, it is like it's a pretty fun standoff for sure. There he did the heat radiation blast though, which I can't parry and I can't like get the charges off of. So I have to just dash away from it. And this next one here is going to be a regular blast, thankfully. So we can counterattack this one. So I dropped the SP2 and yeah, there we go. Get that nice Sister Eagle damage. That Sister Eagle SP2 is so beautiful as well. Her animations are top tier, in all honesty. Like, both the SP1 and the SP2 are just so good. Here he drops the SP1, and now it's time for the next radiation blast. Here I dropped a heavy attack, and it is now go time. And check out this damage. 46,000 on the striker, go back in, 50,000 mediums, the same 4,000 per tick bleeds, and he is just melting at this point. The damage output is just so absurd here. And yeah, we're approaching the final phase now. Just a few more hits. We just dropped those axe attacks, and yeah, we are now in the final phase. So it's time for the final standoff between Chee'ilth and the ultimate gamma threat. So let's just get it done here, man. Here he drops the SP1, no big deal. First radiation blast, here we go. Gotta parry it, he parries it, and now it's time for the standoff. it is like ping pong essentially, which is very, very funny, but also pretty tough at times to deal with. So yeah, this final phase is very fun, but also quite the challenge as well. It really does test your skill with parrying, so gotta be ready for it, right? But with Sister Eagle's guidance, Chee'ilth is one of the best parriers in the game, so yeah, she has the experience with parrying because it gives her a massive benefit. So here it drops CSP1 yet again, and now it's time for the next round of ping pong essentially. There I parry it again, and we win that standoff yet again. And now his health is going down a lot faster than usual, so this is perfect for us. And he is down to about 6% health, and those bleeds are ticking away for sure. Here he drops the SP1 yet again, we just exit, no big deal. And here I drop a combo, I drop a heavy attack, and now it's time for the final standoff between me and Bahamut. So here he drops the SP1, no big deal, I dex it, and here we go, the final round of ping pong, and we win it yet again. So he is now down to negative corrupted armor. Here I drop the heavy attack, and now this matchup is going to be essentially over. So I bait the SP1, I go back in, and that is Bahamut down. The final Gamma threat has been eliminated. I pretty much love everything about this champion. How I got her, how she is my 3rd ever Ascension, how powerful she is kit-wise, and like how she has 2 very, very strong spirits guiding her, and her backstory as well. Just everything about this champion is just so well done. So yeah, I really appreciate this character, and I'm glad that I have her as my 3rd ever Ascension. So let me know your thoughts on Chee'ilth and this video in general, and yeah, that's about it for me.